But yeah, I'm going to get into it. And so I think they start with opening statements.
Senator Sanders, the floor is yours.
Well, let me thank the Kennedy Institute for hosting the event, Fox News for broadcasting it, and my colleague Lindsey Graham for being here with me. I am the longest-serving independent in the history of the United States Congress. So what I'm going to tell you today is not something that you hear often on Fox or CNN or ABC or the Washington Post, or in fact in the halls of Congress. What I'm going to tell you is that the working class and the middle class of this country are in serious trouble. We are moving toward an oligarchic form of society where a small number of billionaires not only have extraordinary wealth, they have extraordinary political power. We are living at a time when half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck in the wealthiest country on earth, when 70 million Americans have no help.
I love it so far. Love it from Bernie. And I don't think that they had a specific singular topic for this debate. I think it's going to be about a variety of issues. I love though that these are the issues that Bernie chooses to focus on. He is overwhelmingly the only politician that goes back to these issues over and over and over again, and I just his laser focus a certain amount. That's why honestly, I don't watch a whole lot of Bernie Sanders speeches or anything like that, because they can often get very repetitive in the sense that he'll say the same things, but that's because these things aren't being fixed. And as a politician, I love that he has this laser focus and always talks about these issues, and it's good to be repetitive and for what Bernie's trying to do.
Insurance or are underinsured, when we have a starvation minimum wage at the federal level of $7.25 an hour, where half of the older workers in this country have nothing in the bank as they fear retirement. What I believe is that now is the time not to defend the establishment, which is doing phenomenally well. When you have two people on top in America who own more wealth than the bottom 40%, two people, top 1%.
That's just staggering. So before, commonly one that Bernie used to cite was that the Walton children, collectively, I think there's 5 of them, own more wealth than the bottom 40% of Americans. Now it's even just the top 2 wealthiest individuals, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, own more wealth than the bottom 40%. That is just outrageous.
More wealth than the bottom 92%. CEOs of major corporations today are making 350 times.
Appear to be buffering.
Corporations today are making 350 times more than their workers, and we have more income and wealth inequality than any time in American history. Now is the time for the American people to stand up, make it clear that enough is enough, and that we need a government that starts representing all of our people, not just wealthy campaign contributors. What does that mean? It means that we have to end a corrupt political system in which big money buys elections.
That topic of political bribery, the ability of wealthy individuals to donate to politicians to get them to do what they want, Bernie talked about it a ton in 2016. I wish he had talked about it more in 2020. He honestly, the issue was so much about Medicare for all. He just honestly didn't really talk about it as much. I like that he's bringing it back though as one of his top kind of policy prescriptions. I hope, my fingers are still crossed that he runs in 2024. That this is something that he chooses to recenter his political commentary on.
Means that we have to end a very unfair tax system in which billionaires in a given year don't pay a nickel in federal taxes. It means we have to raise the federal minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. It means that we have to join every other major country on earth in understanding that health care is a human right, not a privilege. and stop spending twice as much per capita on healthcare to enrich the drug companies and the insurance companies. It means that Medicare is going to have to negotiate prescription drug prices so that we can lower the cost of prescription drug.
I love it that he's talking about both. He talks very broad, very big goals. He brings up universal healthcare, that we should guarantee healthcare as a right. I love it. And then he also is like, on top of that, he's like, all right, also I think that we should allow for Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. So that's more of something in the immediate that could be done like right away. And then also you have this more systemic change that could happen. So I like that he's interweaving both of them.
By 50%. It means that we cannot continue to be the only major country on earth not to have paid family and medical leave. It means that we have to restore the $300 tax credit so that we are not continuing to be a nation which has one of the highest rates of childhood poverty in the United States. It means that we have to expand Medicare to cover dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses, so that elderly people in this country can live out their remaining years in dignity. And it means, among other things, that we cannot continue to ignore climate change, which is an existential threat to this planet. And obviously, given the tragedies that we have faced in the last month in terms of guns, we need serious and real gun safety legislation. Bottom line, let's create a government that works for all of us, not just the people on top. Thank you.
Wow, obviously that's an open statement, so you're going to cover a lot of stuff, but Bernie just ran the gauntlet there. He's talking about paid family and medical leave. He's talking about campaign contributions. He's talking about universal health care. He's talking about expanding Medicare to include dental, vision, and eye care. He talks about gun reform. He's talking about a whole host of issues. I loved it.
Senator Graham.
Well, thank you.
I haven't watched this debate. You guys are watching me watch it live with you guys. It's not going on live right now, but it's this is the first time I've watched it. I've only seen clips. I have a guess though. We're not going to like Lindsey Graham's opening statement quite as much.
This is an awesome place. If you get in Boston, come see the place. I want to thank. We're here to honor Ted and Orrin. Ted Kennedy, Orrin Hatcher were great friends. They fought like tigers, but they could work together. And I have a different take on things than Bernie, and we'll get through that here in a minute. But I like Bernie. Bernie's own message. I hear this every day, all the time, and he believes it. But I just want to remind you that the Democrats...
Look at that. Even Lindsey Graham is talking about how much Bernie Sanders is on message. Bernie's just so laser focused on the issues that even Lindsey Graham is like, yeah, Bernie's, That's why I see a lot of people respect Bernie, even people that don't like him. See, this debate, I promise this debate isn't going to turn into me just gushing over Bernie. But yeah.
...are in charge. After hearing Bernie talk, you would believe we're building a wall to keep people in, not out. Things are tough, but they're going to get better, right? And socialism is not the answer to all these problems. So I just want to remind you a little bit about where we're at. The Democrats have the House, the Senate, and the White House. All these problems that we're talked about, they could change or fix if they could. Their agenda is not working. So here's what I want to tell you. Vote Republican in 2022. Do yourself a favor and ask yourself the following question. Am I better off today than I was 2 years ago? And if you were in a world of hurt 2 years ago. Because
I think it's just so... It's obviously, from a rhetorical standpoint, he's going to say this. But Lindsey Graham was one of the 50 Republican senators that blocked Build Back Better in the Senate. He's one of the 50 Republican senators that have helped block this administration from being able to do almost anything. Because along with Joe Manchin, all it takes is Joe Manchin not being willing to vote with the Democrats, and they're not able to get anything through the Senate. Because with most things, you have to be able to override the filibuster, and without 60 votes, that's gone. But with reconciliation, all you need is 51 votes, and since there's 50-50, the vice president becomes a tiebreaker. But because of Manchin and Graham, if Graham wanted to get some of this stuff passed, he could have voted with the Democrats on Build Back Better. He chose not to, though.
We're not better off today. And there's a reason. Policy matters. We're all Americans. He loves his vision of America. I disagree with it, but I admire his passion. But here's where we stand. 8.6% inflation, the highest in 40 years. When you go to the grocery store for $100, you're lucky if you get a bag. Go fill up your car. You got to take a mortgage out to fill up your car. What's happened here? The policies that are being pursued by my Democratic colleagues are not working. The average American is in a world of hurt. 2 million people will come across the border illegally this year. The highest in the history of the country.
I wish he would get into which policies he believes is leading to this inflation. I wish he would go. Maybe he does at a different point, but I wish he would. And now he's talking about immigration. It's just, yeah.
In December 2020, we had the lowest illegal immigrant crossings in 40 years. In April,
What was also going on in December of 2020? You've got to look at, there were bigger things that were going on, maybe?
of this year, it was over 250,000. This is dangerous and it's irresponsible. And you're paying almost $800 a day to pay for an illegal immigrant child in U.S. custody. It's breaking the bank, and it's just
We should let them out of U.S. custody then, shouldn't we, Lindsey Graham?
a matter of time till some terrorist comes over here and kills us all, if they could, because they don't see Bernie and I much different. We're Americans in their eyes. So we got a broken border, we need to fix it. Crime is rampant. This defund the police effort that you've been leading and others has taken a toll. I was picked up at the airport by a couple of cops and they patted me on the back. I thought I was in South Carolina. The bottom line is it's a tough time to be a cop now.
Wait, I didn't understand his thing. He said he was at an airport and the cops patted him on the back. It's because he's a senator? Interesting. But also, when people talk about the crime is up in different areas. That has to do with a whole host of factors. Economic deprivation is sweeping the nation right now. Income inequality, economic inequality is very much higher right now. There are a lot of things that are contributing to this, but it's not really defund the police because a lot of places, frankly, didn't defund their police, and yet they're seeing similar increases in crime.
Wants to go into law enforcement. It's time to let the cops know you're not the problem, the criminal's the problem. So we got a lot of problems. Vote Republican and stop this madness. This is the most radical, costly agenda in modern American history. It's not working for you, and it needs to change. And they want to do more if they could. Vote Republican to stop packing the Supreme Court. We've worked hard to create a conservative majority.
The Democrats haven't packed the court. The Democrats, I mean, it doesn't look like they're going to pack the court. I mean, maybe I'd be open to it. I'd be open to pack it, but the Democrats aren't. And Joe Manchin's not going to vote to pack the court. And so I think that the Democrats aren't packing the court.
They want to increase the number of people on the Supreme Court to make it liberal again. They want to federalize elections, doing away with the voter IDs and instituting ballot harvesting. They want to abolish the Electoral College so New York and California will pick the president in perpetuity.
Couple things. One, the supposed ballot harvesting is when someone can give their vote to someone so they can go drop it off for them. For example, like an elderly individual could give their vote to someone so they can drop it off. Ballot harvesting has such like a negative connotation to it, but that's what's being talked about. And then talking about abolishing the Electoral College, I would vote one person, one vote. We should abolish the Electoral College. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any Democrats in the Senate or even in the Congress that have proposed that, like seriously proposed that. And so, I mean, I wish.
Bottom line, it can be better. In 2019, we had the lowest poverty rate in modern history. African American families before COVID were having the highest income in the history of following statistics. Women were doing better. We had a secure border. The Arabs and the Israelis were working together. We had a country that was moving in the right direction.
Did I miss that part of 2019 when there was like peace in the Middle East? Did I miss this part? Did people not know that in 2019, for example, Donald Trump dropped over 7,000 bombs on Afghanistan, right? And when he talks about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that there was enormous amounts of settlement expansion that was taking place in 2019. Even if you talk about the Abraham Accords, those didn't happen until 2020.
We had low gas prices.
And which, by the way, yes, several Gulf dictatorships signed normalization agreements with Israel. It's very much been overstated.
And jobs were abundant. And along come COVID. We can get back to that pre-COVID America, but you're never going to get back unless you change leadership in this country in 2022.
Notice how Lindsey Graham didn't say how any of those things would happen. How does Lindsey Graham believe we would get back to that economy? I would really like to hear him answer that. I hopefully I don't think this is the end of his statement.
Senator Sanders, your response?
No, thank you.
Just
Okay.
one.
All right, I guess it was. Hopefully, in the back and forth, Lindsey Graham gets into how he thinks that we'll be able to achieve those numbers.
As a matter of fact, I never called for the defunding of the police.
I stand corrected.
What I do believe in is former mayor, as a matter of fact.
Also, I saw this clip ahead of time. It's true. Bernie never actually called for defunding the police. He broke with the squad at the time, and so yeah, people can go look it up.
Work very well with our police department is we need community-based policing that reflects the people in those communities. But we have to fight racism in every way that we can. But I've never called for defunding the police. Now, it's interesting to hear Senator Graham speak because other than the partisan rhetoric, what you don't hear him talking about are, in fact, the most important issues facing this country. That's what the establishment does. Lindsey is a very good and effective representative of the establishment. Does Lindsey have a concern that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people? That some 60,000 people a year die because they don't get to a doctor on time? I didn't hear much about that in that opening statement. Lindsey care that we have the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, and that the pharmaceutical industry right now has 1,500 paid lobbyists in Washington, D.C. to make...
See, if Lindsey Graham responds with he agrees that those are issues, I really hope Bernie presses him on how are we going to fix that. And Lindsey Graham is going to just say deregulate, deregulate, deregulate. And I think that is where a really fruitful debate can come, I think.
That in some cases we pay 10 times more for the medicine that we need. Did Lindsey talk about the fact that we have in South Carolina and all over this country tens of millions of workers working for starvation wages? Did he talk about a corrupt political system in which billionaires today can start a super PAC? And I guess you have some familiarity with super PACs. They help fund your campaign.
I love that so much. I love Bernie. Yes, he's like, it's like, I know you have some familiarity with super PACs. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. We should look that up. We should look up on Open Secrets. Let's see. Open Secrets. Lindsey Graham. Open Secrets Campaign Finance Summary. What is this? No data found. What is this? Senator Lindsey Graham. Here we go. Awesome. So, Lindsey Graham, he has received, wow, look at that. From the lawyer/law firms as an industry, he has received over $300,000 in PAC money. From the real estate industry, he has received over $130,000 in PAC money. He's received, wow, this is just, let's see if we can show this to you guys. That is quite a bit of PAC money. From the securities and investment industry, he's received over $168,000. Health professionals, that's going to be some private insurance. Over $288,000 from PAC money. Yeah, those are some interesting numbers from Mr. Lindsey Graham.
Who can spend unlimited amounts of money to elect candidates. You have the absurd situation where super PACs frequently spend more money than the candidates themselves. I didn't hear Lindsey talk about the crisis of climate change or the reality that scientists are telling us, not Bernie Sanders, Lindsey. This is what the best scientists in the world are telling us. We don't get our act together. The planet we're going to be leaving our kids and future generations will be becoming increasingly uninhabitable. We're talking about great cities like Charleston, South Carolina. You're aware of that. Neighborhoods flooding. There are people who are thinking that not only Charleston, but Miami, New York City will be half underwater by the end of the century. You got to talk about that. You got to talk about income and wealth inequality. Do you have a concern that two people own more wealth than the bottom 42%? Do you have a concern in terms of corporate concentration of ownership? You got 3 Wall Street firms now, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, who control $20 trillion in assets. They control hundreds and hundreds of corporations throughout this country. Bottom line is we are moving toward oligarchy. And if we don't stand up and say that we need a government that represents work,
I mean, frankly, you can make the case that we already have a very, maybe oligarchy isn't the proper word to describe the U.S. system as it currently is, but you can make a really strong case that it is a form of oligarchy. When he talks about the massive ownership by companies like BlackRock and other private equity firms, it's very staggering, especially when you see them now they're entering the homeowner market and buying up enormous amounts of retail housing. So,
people and the middle class, I worry very much about the future of this country, and I hope you'll speak to some of those issues.
Well, I'll be glad to speak to my campaign. I raised $112 million. The average donation was about $40, lindseygraham.com. The bottom line is the America that we all seek to achieve, where everybody can do well, is not going to happen unless things change.
He also it's worth noting, Super PAC money is not money that goes directly to Graham's campaign. It's unlimited funding that goes to the Super PAC that is then spent on campaign advertising and different things for Lindsey Graham. So that wouldn't affect the Super PAC money wouldn't affect his campaign contribution, like his individual donations. So that was an interesting little trick he played there, but he didn't actually address the Super PAC issue.
You haven't called for defunding the police. Will you do me a favor and say publicly today, those who are calling for defunding the police, stop, because you're hurting the country. It's people in your party, the liberal wing, I don't know what you call these folks, but they believe the cops are the problem. You say you've never...
See, if Lindsey Graham was smart, and I'm glad he didn't do this, but from a rhetorical standpoint, it would have played really rhetorically well if he had stopped there and asked Bernie Sanders to say that. He didn't. He chose to keep talking, but that would have been a good rhetorical point. Obviously, I wouldn't agree with. I mean, I'm not a fan of Lindsey Graham, so I'm not looking to give him tips. But that would have been a strong move.
Done it, but people in your party are doing it all the time. At the end of the day, I believe climate change is real, but that's no reason to destroy the fossil fuel industry in this country. We're moving to electric cars, but that's going to be 2034, 2035. Your party has made us miserable when it comes to filling up our tank. Your party took 10 million acres out of production. You closed the ability to produce oil and gas in Anwar, and you wonder why it costs so much to fill up your car. What the hell's happened in the last 2 years? Their policies. You think this is an accident? I'd like to lower health care costs, but I'm not going to take away your private coverage.
So we'll get into the healthcare in a second. But with the electric vehicles, he talked about, okay, by 2034, 2035, that's when a lot of people will own electric cars. Well then, Mr. Graham, would you support subsidizing the ability for people to purchase electric cars so that they can get them quicker, so that we can move away from fossil fuels at a faster rate? My guess is he would not support that.
Senator Sanders has a bill called Medicare for All. Bring it to the floor for a vote. I'm begging you to take Medicare for All and bring it to the floor of the Senate, which looks just like this, and let's vote. The reason it won't pass is because you're going to take private health care away from 200 million Americans, put us all under the government umbrella. It's going to cost about $40 trillion. In 2034, we'll be spending as much to maintain Medicare for All as we do for the entire federal government today.
So 40 trillion is an insanely high estimate. Now, is there possibly an estimate that has that 40 trillion? It's worth noting that is over 10 years. Whenever it's above, so the number is generally between 3 and the highest I've seen is 3.8. But let's say Lindsey Graham saw a study that says it'd be $4 trillion in a year. That's per year. It's worth noting that our current healthcare expenditure, national healthcare spending, is right around 3.2 trillion. So the 3 trillion number, that would actually be lower than what we're currently spending. And then let's say it's $4 trillion a year. So it's 800 billion more a year, but now we are covering over 20 million Americans that don't currently have insurance. You don't have out-of-pocket health expenditures. You don't have your private insurance premiums, your co-pays, your deductibles. All of those would go away if we implemented a full Medicare for All system. And so you have to pair it with what you get.
And people will have less. You get what the government gives you when they're ready to give it to you. So this idea of Medicare for All destroys private sector health care, and that is not the answer. Immigration.
And that's my least favorite talking point. The idea that like you'll lose your private health insurance. There won't be private health insurance, but you will be fully covered. The insurance that you currently get from your private insurance, you will have that. You will be covered, and ideally with more, but you won't have the premiums. You won't have copays. This is I'm talking gold standard system. I'm talking we implement a full Medicare for all system. No copays, no deductibles, no premiums. If we eventually, like whatever gets passed will likely be a more watered down proposal where there will be very small copays, for example, I think in certain places like in Canada you might have like a $10 copay or something like that. It's nothing like what it is in the US currently though.
When are you going to fix the border? Y'all are in charge for 2 years. We've been telling you what you're doing doesn't work. I know you don't like Trump, but Trump got it right when it came to remain in Mexico. His policies secured our border. You've repealed all those.
Remain in Mexico is literally a violation of international law. Remain in Mexico because when someone comes to your country and tries to claim asylum, you're not allowed to say, oh, you can go wait in another country. No, when someone comes for asylum, you're supposed to let them wait for their asylum claim in your country. Now, ideally, it's not supposed to take so long where people wait months to have their asylum claims heard. It's supposed to be done at a fast pace. But yeah, remain in Mexico is one, very dangerous, and two, a violation of international law.
We're having more people come here illegally than exist in the state of Vermont. How easy would it be for some terrorist group to get into the middle of this human chaos? So I would ask you to focus on lowering gas prices, securing the border, and bringing law and order back to America.
He said exists in Vermont, and I was like, how many people does Vermont have? Vermont is literally, the population of Vermont is 600,000 people. Very, very small state.
And the only way you're going to do that, Senator Sanders, is abandon the agenda that you've charted for America, because it is not working.
Well, let's talk about gas prices, because you're right. They are outrageously high in Vermont. They're now filled up the other day, $5.05 a gallon. Meanwhile, the major oil companies made $35 billion in profit in the first quarter of this year. And at the end of the year, it is estimated they're going to give $88 billion in stock buybacks to their wealthy shareholders. So I do think we have to do something about the outrageously high price of gas. I think the president should bring the major oil companies in and tell them we're going to have a windfall profits tax on what they're doing in order to stop them from ripping off the American people. The last time that oil prices were at $118 a...
I love that. I never knew that was Bernie's proposal. But yeah, windfall profit tax on these oil and gas companies would be likely put a lot of pressure on them to start not spending so much on stock buybacks. Maybe put some pressure on them to use some of their leftover capital to drill. If that is the goal, if the goal is for them to drill more, well then maybe instead of you putting their money in that direction. But yeah, I love it.
Which is what they are right now, roughly speaking. Average gasoline prices at the pump were $3.83, not over $5 a gallon. So I think in the midst of what is going on in this world,
I super pause. Bernie made a great point there. Here, I'm gonna go back because that's a terrific point. All right, we're gonna play that again.
Pump were $3.83, not over prices at the pump, which is what they are right now. Prices were ripping off the American people. The last time that oil prices were at $118 a barrel, which is what they are right now, roughly speaking, average gasoline prices at the pump were $3.83, not over $5 a gallon. So I think in the midst of...
That is an insanely good point. So the last time oil was $118 a barrel, the average gas price was only $3.88. But now today, when it's $118 a barrel on average, over $5 for gas on average. Why is that? Because there's more profit being extracted out of the system today than there was back then. Because we do see people will say, oh, well, did the corporations magically get greedier? No, what we have seen is greater concentration in these industries. The industry has become more concentrated. There are less firms, and so they have more of an ability to play around with the price like this. And so that's a very, very good point from Bernie.
what is going on in this world, and that is the war in Ukraine and Russia oil and the stopping of oil. I think what the oil companies are doing is taking advantage of that situation and raising prices to an outrageous level, which is hurting the American working family. But the issue goes beyond oil. The issue goes to healthcare. You talked about the cost of healthcare. I am sure you know that in the United States, Lindsay, we spend twice as much per capita on healthcare as do the people of any other country. While major countries like Canada, the UK, Germany manage to provide healthcare to all of their people. Why is that? Because they're not having oil companies, they're not having insurance companies ripping off the system.
I think he misspoke there. I think he meant to just say insurance companies. I don't think he meant to tie it into oil.
What we need to do right now is to take a deep breath, because this country, in fact, Lindsey Graham is right. We're in a lot of deep hurt. All over this country, Vermont, South Carolina, all over this country, people are hurting. But what we don't need right now is demagoguery. What we need is thoughtful solutions to the major crises that we face. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what we need is a government that represents all of us and not just wealthy, powerful, special interests. So that is what I am working on. What I believe, you talk about, will Medicare pass on the floor of the Senate tomorrow? No, it will not. But the real question is not whether it passes or not, it's what the American people want. And you know what the American people do want? They do want Medicare for all. You talk about the joys and beauties of private insurance. Talk to the millions of workers who lost their private insurance.
Yeah, I think that's a worthwhile point. When so Lindsey Graham brought up I wish they would let Medicare for all come up for a vote. He goes, because I know it would fail. And then Bernie's like, well, ask yourself, why would it fail? The majority of Americans do support some form of universal health care coverage. Probably they would be more supportive of a public option than Medicare for all. But regardless, they're in favor of some form of universal health care. Why would senators vote against that?
COVID. So I think it is time for the working families of this country to stand up, demand a government represents all, not just the few.
So I'm calling on Senator Schumer to bring Medicare for all to the floor of the Senate sooner rather than later so we can vote on it. Because if the American people want it, and
Lindsey Graham knows for a fact that they would filibuster a vote on Medicare for all so fast, they would not let them actually vote on Medicare for all.
People who vote against it should lose their job. That's the way it works.
Especially if there was any chance that it would pass.
So in terms of your proposal for Medicare for all, I am challenging you and your party who run the Senate to bring it to the floor for a vote. And we'll see where the votes are. Now let's go back to gas prices. How did we go from energy independence to where we are now? Policy matters. During the campaign in 2020, President Biden and Senator Sanders campaigned against eliminating fossil fuels as we know it in America. Basically, shut it down. No fracking, shut down production. Let me tell you about oil prices. Supply, demand. It was $2.38 a gallon, price of gasoline, before COVID hit. We went into lockdown because we had to. It went to $1.77. Now, nobody was saying give the oil companies a subsidy when it was $1.77. When Biden came into office, it went back to $2.38.
Wait, what was that point there? Wait, he said we should have, nobody said give them a subsidy when it was $1.77? Why would we subsidize the oil and gas oh, that's interesting.
What's happened between then and now? The policies you pursued in terms of energy production has decreased production in the United States in a very dramatic way. You took oil leases off the table, $45 billion tax on energy production.
There are literally thousands of unused leases for drilling that exist right now that are not being used. Permits that have been approved for drilling that are not currently being used. So yeah, that's...
You shut down the Keystone Pipeline, You took the $10 million acres that Trump put into production out of production, and you're wondering what happened to gas prices. What happened to gas prices, you declared war on fossil fuels in the United States, and when you go to the pump, you're a victim of that war. Well, let's change that. Let's get back to a rational energy policy. Let's send American gas to Europe so they'd be less reliant on Russian gas. Let's cut Putin off at the knees. Let's find alternatives to Russian oil and gas. It's not the oil companies that are driving these prices. They want to produce more, they just can't.
The embargo on Russian oil is a giant reason for why prices are higher today. It's not the only reason. I would even say it's the biggest reason. But not purchasing Russian oil and gas by the U.S. or other European nations is a giant contributing factor. And we would have to get back to that $2.38 average, we'd have to pump substantially more than just what we were doing before COVID.
It's not Russia. It's 8% of the oil we use. It is the policies of this administration.
Wait, 8% is a lot. 8%, cutting off 8% of the oil we use is a giant amount.
The goal of this administration is to destroy fossil fuel production in America, and they're on track to do that. And folks, if you want to lower gas and oil prices, vote Republican to see if we can find a few Democrats will go back to increase production in America so that we can lower gas prices in a way that works. All I can tell you is in terms of getting sick in America, more people come to America for health care than they go anywhere else. To our doctors and nurses who've been through hell out there, God bless you.
Senator Sanders, 4 minutes for...
Was that all he had to say about healthcare? One, tens of thousands of people leave the U.S. every year to go get healthcare in other countries. Yes, some people come here to the U.S., but also many people leave the U.S. to go get healthcare in other places. He just said, like, God bless our healthcare workers. That's not a policy. Maybe he was running out of time. In all fairness, maybe he was running out of time. Also, side note, shout out to the moderator, Bret Baier. Not a huge Bret Baier fan, but for just letting them go back and forth. I really do appreciate that. I appreciate that he's just letting them talk. The best moderators are the ones you don't know they're there.
Closing statement here on this section 1.
Senator Graham talks about the need for more oil production. And that's just what the oil companies really want to do. Really? This year, they plan to provide $88 billion, not for new oil production, but for stock buybacks that go to the wealthiest people in the country, people who own.
Yes, stock buyback should be illegal. They were illegal before Reagan. Reagan made them legal. They should go back to being illegal. They're literally stock price manipulation.
Their shares. As a nation, I think the time is very long overdue for us to have the courage to do something which is not easy. And that is to take on the people who contribute to Senator Graham's campaign and to Democratic campaigns. To tell the people on top who during this pandemic, this terrible pandemic, which took 1 million lives, when millions of people are suffering with long COVID, where, as Lindsay says, our doctors and nurses performed absolutely heroically. And during that period, you know what else happened? The billionaires in this country saw a $2 trillion increase in their wealth. That's the people who own the oil companies, people who own the insurance companies, people who own the drug companies, people who own the major Wall Street firms. So the challenge that we face right now is to kind of envision the society we want for our kids and our grandchildren. Do we think that as a nation, all people are entitled to health care? I do. Is that a radical idea? No. It exists 50 miles away from where I live in Canada, which spends half as much on healthcare but guarantees healthcare to all people.
I really think that is one of the strongest arguments for universal healthcare is just that, like, this is the opposite of a radical idea. Every other developed nation has figured this out.
Exists virtually in every major country. Not a radical idea. Is it a radical idea to negotiate prescription drug prices, that Medicare negotiate prescription drug prices? Of course, it's not a radical idea. Why aren't we doing it? Because the pharmaceutical industry has endless amounts of money to buy politicians, to lobby, and to make campaign contributions. Is it a radical idea to say that every kid in this country, no matter where they live, has the right to get a higher education? I don't think so. Other countries around the world already do that. You go in many European countries, do you know how much it costs to go to medical school? Virtually nothing. So I happen to believe that we should make public colleges and universities tuition free. Let's deal with the issue of guns.
I love that. You know, this is the first time they've talked about college in this debate. But yeah, no, expanding K through 12 education to also include free public universities, tuition-free public universities is a phenomenal idea.
We're in a chamber today named after Ted Kennedy, whose two brothers, John and Bobby, were gunned down. And that is, the time is again long overdue for the people of this country, and I think the people are prepared to do it. The question is whether the Congress is prepared to do that, to stand up to the power of the NRA and pass real gun reform legislation. Now, we've seen some progress in recent weeks. We'll see how that plays out. A modest step forward, but we have got to go further. Are we comfortable?
That's the only thing I'll ding Bernie on, is that seems to be the only issue he didn't actually get into specifics on. He said go after the NRA. He said modest gun reform, but what does that look like? And for me personally, I want to know specifics on that, because I might not agree with Bernie with what he proposed. So that's the only part where I'm like, ooh.
In a nation where anybody can walk into a gun store today and come out with an AR-15, which is designed to mow down people in a military fashion. Are we designed with people able to buy high-capacity ammunition magazines? Are we satisfied with a situation where somebody can go to a gun show and not have a background check? So the time now is, for the sake of our children, for the sake of all of us, to pass serious gun safety legislation and have the courage to stand up to the NRA. The bottom line is,
Slightly more specific, but still.
Talks about votes in the Senate, and he's right. Senate and the House are pretty conservative institutions. Poll after poll show they are not representing where the American people are. Our job is to create a government and elected officials who are prepared to stand up against wealthy campaign contributors and fight for ordinary Americans. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to remind you again that your government is run by Democrats. Now, that doesn't mean that we've got all the answers as Republicans, but I find this astonishing that the people in charge of your government are not going to vote on things that's...
One, the Supreme Court is 6-3 conservative majority right now. Two, Lindsey Graham knows that it is a 50-50 split in the Senate. Joe Manchin might as well be a Republican with the way that he's been voting recently. So Lindsey Graham knows this.
Bernie thinks will fix the problem. Why? Because they don't want to vote on these ideas, because they won't fix the problem. So
they can't vote on the ideas because of the filibuster. They can't bring these things to a vote because you can filibuster. You can block the vote, and he knows this. Lindsey Graham knows this.
Here's the point: if you want things to change, you got to get new people in Washington to run the place. Because the answer to America's problems, Senator Sanders, is not more socialism. Your own message, what time is it? It's time to raise taxes on the rich. Your completely own message. Why do we have such a problem at the border, Senator Sanders? Is because policy matters. 2 million people will come across this country illegally.
Bernie didn't really get into immigration in any of his responses. I think that's too bad.
Knows how many we will miss. It's a complete accident waiting to happen down there. We went from having a secure border, having Mexico work with us. We changed our laws so we could have control, and it's all gone away. Folks, if you don't change who's running Washington, the worst is yet to come when it comes to illegal immigration. Gas prices. The reason gas prices are so high is because the policies they've imposed are not working for you. This is a painful transition, as described with President Biden. Their goal is to drive fossil fuels into extinction in the United States. We're talking about getting Iran to produce more gas, Venezuela to produce more gas, the Arabs to produce more gas, to lower prices here. We should be producing more oil and gas here. And when you say it's the oil company's fault, bull. They're in a business. The reason they're not producing more is because it's impossible to produce more under this administration. And if Bernie...
That's just super not true. Thousands of unused permits that are currently... Now, you can say they don't want to produce more. They don't want to invest because they feel like there's more regulation that could come and, like, you know, crash down on their investment. That's one thing. But to say that they can't produce more right now, it's just not true.
Was in charge and people like him, it'd get worse, not better. All I can say is that gas prices are going through the roof and nothing's going to change until you change Washington. Now, I don't expect to fix many of these problems with Bernie. I'll try. But there are plenty of Democrats up there who I think would have a phased-in approach to energy production. We went from being energy independent to having to mortgage your house to fill up your car. How the hell did that happen? It happened because of policy. You got a chance to fix this, American people, and I would ask you to fix it. Put Republicans in charge of the House and the Senate to stop this craziness and see if we can find a path forward from 22 to 24 to get things back to more normal. People out there, Senator Sanders, are living in hell. $600 a month due to inflation, and wages are not going up. America deserves better than this. We can do better than this. But the path charted by Senator Sanders is full-on socialism.
Full-on socialism. Full-on socialism. I think it's worth... So in the video we were watching before this was Ben Shapiro, and how Ben Shapiro said, like, the thing Ben Shapiro was talking about was how a third of young Americans have a favorable opinion on socialism. That's why. That's why so many young people like socialism. Because when you call giving people health care, free paid family and medical leave, when you call that socialism, young people are going to have a favorable view of it. And so the word socialism, when it just means the government doing things, it shouldn't really be shocking when people have different perceptions of it.
Full-on, unequivocal socialism from cradle to grave. That's not going to fix America. We are not a socialist nation. There is a better way. And I'll promise you this. If I'm chairman of any committee, particularly the budget committee, if we take over, I will sit down with Democrats and Republicans to find a way to fix our national debt, which is appalling. Something like...
Look at that. He turned it into a little bit of an application right there. He wants Bernie's job. Bernie is currently the chair of the budget committee. Interesting. I don't know how many committees... Actually, the Senate is so based on seniority, and Lindsey Graham is very much a senior member. That's why Bernie's head of the budget committee, because he's such a senior. He's been in the Senate for such a long time. It wouldn't shock me if Lindsey Graham ranks rather high if Republicans take the Senate.
And bowls, not socialism.
Senators, thank you. That is the end of segment one, if you will.
All right. I was thinking about breaking this into two parts, but I think we're going to do the full thing today. But what I am going to do, that way it doesn't take terribly long, is I'm going to increase the speed to 1.5. Hopefully it is still, you guys will still be able to understand it at 1.5 speed. All right, but I would love to do it all today.
We'll make a transition to the seated, moderated section, and we'll go deeper into some of the discussions you've talked about gas prices, healthcare, immigration, and the like. Stand by. We'll make that transition.
Let's see. It's good.
Economy, a lot that touches. They're going up. They're on the rise. Some of the highest we've seen as of yet. Senator Sanders, President Biden has said recently that this is, and Senator Graham mentioned it, part of a giant transition for the U.S. economy. Is pain at the pump part of that transition to a greener economy?
Well, let me say this, that in terms of inflation, as I'm sure you know, we're looking at an international phenomenon. Germany is the powerhouse of Europe. Their inflation rate, I believe, is 7.8%. UK, somewhat similar. We're a little bit higher than that. So what we're looking at right now, for a variety of reasons, including COVID and breaking of supply chains having to do with China and elsewhere, and I think the greed of corporate America, you add all that stuff together, we're looking at inflation. Now, what I happen to...
I think Bernie really needs to spell out like what he means by greed of corporate America when he talks about inflation, because a lot of people think of inflation as just like when you print more dollars, like that's what people think inflation is. But inflation is measured by rising prices. So as corporations decide to raise their prices, that is how we measure inflation, not by how many dollars are in circulation. And so I think that Bernie, to fully make that point, I think he actually needs to spell that out. So I wish he would.
Brett, I think it is totally irresponsible for us to ignore what scientists call the existential threat to climate change. I think we've got to go forward in two ways. I think we can create millions of jobs transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel energy efficiency and sustainable energy. And I think at the same time, I think the president has got to call those oil companies, those executives into the Oval Office and say, stop ripping off the American people. You can make some money, but you don't have to see a tripling of your profits over last year. You don't have to see $35 billion in profit in one quarter. So
it's unrealistic in the sense that like it wouldn't pass in this economy, but I wish Bernie would talk about us moving towards a more nationalized system for our oil like Norway has, where the government purchases out the majority shares in these companies so that we have greater control over what these companies do. It will make it way easier when we eventually need to transition away from fossil fuels fully, over time, if the government has a greater say in like what those companies can do. And Norway has seen an enormous amount of success with doing that. And so Bernie, like I said, it's not very practical in the sense that it wouldn't pass, but I wish that Bernie would at least he's been so good at opening up the Overton window to more ideas that I wish that he would do that on this one.
we are in that bind where you have to deal with climate change or Charleston is going to be underwater. New York City will be underwater. On the other hand, we have got to protect the average American who cannot afford to pay $5 for a gallon of gas. That's the dilemma, and that's the way we've got to go forward.
Senator Graham, to Senator Sanders' point, is there some corporate greed and profiteering that factors in there? You said it was bull up there, but do you think there's any part of that, to Senator Sanders' point?
Thank you. I think it's supply and demand. I mean, when we were locked down right after COVID hit in 2020, we all went into a lockdown. Gas went to $1.77 a gallon because all of us were home. We weren't working. We were locked down to try to protect each other. And the economy is coming back. It was at $2.38 when President Biden took over. What's happened in the last 2 years? You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. Their campaign agenda was to destroy fossil fuel production. It's not gas companies not wanting to produce more oil and gas. It's the policies have made that almost impossible here at home. Russia, which is invading Ukraine.
There was literally a Federal Reserve survey that found that the number one reason given from oil and gas executives as to why they're not increasing profit is to maintain investor pressure to maintain capital discipline was the number one reason. So quite literally, because they took such a haircut when the prices were so much lower under COVID, that they are trying to make up some of that lost revenue today.
I think Bernie and I agree is that Putin sucks. So, and
I assume you concede that point.
I'm not in favor of the vulgarity, but the intent is correct.
All right. Putin's a bad guy. Yeah, there we go. I'll use the other word. The bottom line is, people know when they go to the pump, it doesn't have to be this way. I don't see anything changing until you change leadership. It's not the oil companies.
Hey, little joke there. I don't want to be a buzzkill, but Lindsey Graham literally called for regime change in Russia. That not like I think that that almost would be a fruitful point to weigh out, because we should not be that it should not be. I don't like Putin. Bernie doesn't like Putin. Lindsey Graham doesn't like Putin. The U.S. should not be pursuing regime change, though, because that would lead to some very, very bad outcomes.
He says, put us out of the fossil fuel business. Some ray of hope. I believe in climate change. Pretty obvious to me that greenhouse gas effect is real. We're going to electrify the transportation fleet by the mid-2030, 2040, somewhere in that time period. Most cars on the road will be electric. Until we get there, there's no reason to drive this generation of Americans into poverty by going to the pump. You have to do two things at once.
That's why we need a Green New Deal. That is why we need it, to subsidize the transition, to make it as painless as possible.
Deal with the economy you have today, increase oil and gas production, reverse the policies on the Keystone Pipeline, get oil from Canada. Better get oil from Canada than it is from the Mideast. So I want more energy production here, but as we phase into electric vehicles, and we will, then we have to look at power generators, Bernie. We're going to have to, wind and solar are great, but they're not enough. The transition fuel will be gas. We should be sending American-owned natural gas to Europe. There are two terminals developed by Germans to receive natural gas from America. We need to unleash American natural gas production to help ourselves, but also to help our friends in Europe so they'd be less dependent on Putin. So my energy strategy is national security as much as anything else. One thing we'd agree on, if the world were less dependent on fossil fuels, who would be the biggest losers? The Iranians, the Russians, Venezuela. So let's get to that better day.
Lindsey Graham is like a massive war hawk, and so it's really interesting that even on this discussion that's been more like kind of like economically focused, bleeding in a little bit. He's like, but don't we want to disempower Iran? What about Venezuela? Don't we want to cut the legs out from under Venezuela a little bit? Like Lindsey Graham is just very much he's a like if this was a foreign policy debate, it would be very apparent.
Let's don't do it this way. You're doing it in a way that's destroying the American economy. The average American is going to be spending $500 more to fuel their car this year than last, and the inflation in this country is caused by bad policy choices. And it's not going to change until you get new people in charge in Washington. Vote Republican in 2022.
Senator Sanders.
If I could.
Yep.
What Lindsay is not dealing with is inflation is not just Joe Biden's issue. You have to explain why it takes place around the world, and that has to do with supply chains, the terrible war in Ukraine, and in my view, corporate greed. Lindsay says the oil companies can't. Gee whiz, they're just tied up. They just cannot produce more oil. But apparently, they got $88 billion this year to give stock buybacks. In other words, they have the money to invest into oil production if they chose to do that. Now, Lindsay also makes the point that, we got to move to electric vehicles, and I certainly...
Yeah, I feel like that's just a reality that Lindsey Graham just has to acknowledge. Like, he can say it's justified. Like, I feel like Lindsey Graham's argument would be that it's justified for them to allocate their capital towards stock buybacks rather than production because Biden has been hostile to the oil administration. But Lindsey Graham doesn't even want to make... And by the way, when I say hostile, I'm very tepid. Biden has made some very tepid statements about the fossil fuel industry. But, like, that is the truthful... That's where you get into just... It's a matter of disagreements. But Lindsey Graham not even acknowledging that reality, I feel like it's bizarre.
Put that. The problem is, Lindsay, we are in a moment of... What's the word that I can use? I guess the scientists use it, existential. All right? We're seeing temperature rise all over the world. That means more drought, less food production. It means more flooding. It means more migration because people around the world are not going to be able to grow the food or get the water, that they need more disease. So this is not saying, well, it's a good idea to move toward energy efficiency and sustainable energy. No, we have to do it right now if we love our children and our grandchildren. And the challenge that we have is how do you do it without forcing working people to pay $5 for a gallon of gas? I think we could do it. But it's not either or.
So that's back to my original question. Do you think that the high price of gas speeds up that transition in your mind and worth the price that it costs?
No, that's not what I'm saying, Brett.
No, I know it's not, but I'm just trying to get to how you do it.
No, I think what we have got to do is, and of course, build back better. Lindsay's here beating up on the president all the time. We passed, in terms of the American Rescue Plan, we passed a $1.9 trillion piece of legislation, which went a long way. Let's remember where we were in the midst of the pandemic. Massive unemployment. Thousands of people dying every single day. And we passed legislation which said, we are your working family, you're hurting, we're going to get a check to you. You're unemployed, we're going to extend unemployment benefits. You're a hospital that's going broke, we're going to get money to you. You need a vaccine, but you can't get it, we're going to make it possible for you to get it. We're going to improve schools to deal with the pandemic. We passed that. The president deserves credit for that. But again, in terms of I
think that part of what Bernie needs to synthesize into this, though, is that when you do that, when you have this runaway inflation, and you do have that government stimulus, if you don't want to your edge just ended up like it becomes redistribution towards those corporations because if they just raise their prices to meet this money coming in, I feel like it needs to be paired with antitrust laws. It needs to be passed with some sort of, like, if you want to get into some sort of price gouging regulation in terms of the oil industry. But if you're just giving people checks so that they can spend it, this is one of the critiques people have of UBI. People say, okay, you give someone $1,000 a month, okay, rent's just going to go up. All these other issues corporations will just rise their prices because they know they can get more out of people. You need to have more systemic changes than just the checks. Now, the checks can really help. The checks can help ease some of the burden for people. I'm not making it. I think UBI is likely going to be just inevitable at some point in the future. But I think that Bernie needs to connect those issues.
Energy prices. We have got to do a lot more here in the United States. But just to blame the president. The Republicans were in power. They had a great record. They had massive tax breaks to the richest people in this country. And I think Lindsay voted to throw 32 million Americans off of the health insurance that they have. Great record. Massive income and wealth inequality growth. So we have to be thoughtful about how we go forward. But beating up on the president is just not good enough.
Let's try to get to something you both agree on. You have voted similarly on trade issues before. When it comes to lifting tariffs on China, I assume you're both in the no category. Is that fair?
It depends. If it's for solar installations, I would support it. We need to get more solar paneling into this country. But I don't know, Lindsay.
That's a rough one. And I think that Bernie is just... so David Dayen is someone people should check out in the American Prospect. He's a really good piece on this, and just the American Prospect in general is a really good outlet that people should check out. But the solar panels that we get from Matt Stoller has also done some good work on this. He's another economist. The solar panels we get from China are produced using a very, very damaging for the environment coal. It's a very, very dirty coal. Also using some labor practices that we all should not be supporting. I think that reinvigorating our domestic industry for the production of solar panels would be really important, and so I do think that Bernie is missing the mark a little bit on that one.
I have, over the years, in the House and in the Senate, believed that the trade policies that Democrats and Republicans, Clinton and Bush, brought forth, which said that to American workers, yeah, we're going to pass NAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China. We're going to allow corporations to shut down by the thousands in America and then move to China or Mexico. I thought then that was a disaster. I believe now that has been a disaster.
Senator Graham?
Yeah, I'd be very reluctant. I think the tariffs imposed on China basically levels the field because they cheat. So one reason that Mexico decided to keep illegal immigrants in Mexico until their court date would come at the United States regarding asylum is that Trump threatened to put tariffs on products coming out of Mexico. And that actually worked because of what he did with China. But back to the American Rescue Plan. We worked together about $6 trillion of bipartisan spending to help with COVID. It rocked the world. A million people lost their lives, doctors and nurses. We've all gone through hell. But the American Rescue Plan, according to Larry Summers, not Lindsey Graham, was ill-conceived and ill-designed, and he said would do more to spark inflation than any policy initiative in the last several decades. This was
Why is he citing Larry Summers? I guess Larry Summers is like, I guess he technically was. See, Larry Summers is a very, very prominent, like, I would call him right-wing economist. He's very much right-wing, but he did work in the Obama administration. And so I guess, like, Lindsey Graham thinks that he can cite Larry Summers as like, oh, see, look, even this Obama guy is saying it. But, like, Larry Summers is a notorious, like, free market kind of economist, or maybe free market's not the right word. He's a neoliberal economist, but I don't like throwing that word around a whole lot.
last year. He was right. 9% of the $1.9 trillion went to vaccines and testing. $5 million went to this place, and I love this place. Pickleball courts. There's still $200 or $300 billion left unspent. Everything Larry Summers said about the American Rescue Plan, increasing inflation, happened. The reason we can't find baby formula is our policies here. We're down to 2 or 3 places in America that can make baby formula. The reason gas prices are high is when you took over, Senator Sanders, you took out of production 10 million acres that were in production. You shut down the Keystone Pipeline. Your policies are leading to a surge in gas prices with no end to them. So all I can suggest to the American people, this inflationary death spiral we're in.
Sorry, you got to hit Lindsey Graham on the fact that the Keystone XL pipeline for oil that was going to be exported, it was going to come through Canada, it was going to go be exported off the Gulf of Mexico. That's what the XL stands for, Exports Limited. It just wasn't people. The Keystone XL pipeline talking point drives me crazy because there are things you could talk about. You could talk about like the some of the drilling that was shut down in Alaska. You can't talk about that. But the pipeline one, I don't know why this is such entered the conservative ether as a talking point.
Is being driven by policies that don't work. And finally, have we said anything about how to control and how to control border? Is there a solution in the making to control the border before it's too late? This is why when you vote in 2022, I hope you'll realize that the course we're on now is very dangerous for this country in multiple ways.
Talk about it. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
When we talk about voting in 2022, obviously my hope is you will not follow Senator Graham's advice. I have a lot of problems with the Democrats, but they are far superior to where the Republicans are. Let me give you an example. When we talk about major crises, I think many leading political scientists will tell you that right now we're looking for the first time.
Now, I will say Bernie has an interesting role in the fact that he is legitimately an independent. Like, he is not a member of one of the two parties in the Senate, which is very difficult to do. It is very, very hard to win outside of the two-party system. Now, he ran as a Democrat for president, but he does, like, within the Senate ecosystem. Now, he votes for the Democrats more often, but he does have that kind of interesting line where he can, like, criticize the Democrats as a bit of an outsider.
Lifetime and yours had a real threat to the existence of democracy in America. And you know why? Because we have a former president, his name is Donald Trump, who goes around the country telling people, hey, I won the election. In fact, I probably won it by a landslide, but they stole it. They took it away from me. All right? Now, that happens to be what we call a big lie. And yet many of the Republicans that Senator Graham are asking you to vote for are maintaining that big lie. What does that mean? It goes beyond Trump. It goes beyond the 2020 election. It means what they are saying is the entire system, you can't trust anybody. And if you can't trust the election results, then what is the obvious alternative? We need a strong man, right? Conservatives went to, I think it was Hungary, to meet with Mr. Orban, who runs an authoritarian-type society. So the struggle we're facing is not just that Lindsey and I disagree on this or that issue, which we do.
Yeah, I love that Bernie mentions the CPAC that was held in Hungary. Viktor Orban, Narendra Modi in India, Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. Actually, fascinatingly, CPAC, the next CPAC, the international one that's going to be held, will be held in Brazil. Bolsonaro. So basically, this movement that's kind of forming, this right-wing nationalist movement that is forming, is very much coalescing. They're agreeing with each other. You had Viktor Orban at the CPAC, at this the CPAC held in Hungary, say how Tucker Carlson needs to be run 24 hours a day in the United States. Tucker Carlson actually even spoke at the CPAC. So there is this very troubling movement that is growing right now internationally. So I'm glad that Bernie touched on that.
It is the future of American democracy, and whether we move to authoritarianism based on, among other things, a very big lie.
Well, quickly,
Guess
can you
what?
address that, Senator?
Trump lost the election.
Can you address that, Senator? I mean, can you say definitively the election was not stolen?
Yeah, I voted to certify the election. There was some mail-in balloting chicanery out there, but no, I voted to certify the election. President Biden's the president. And what
Did he win the election?
Yeah.
Okay. Then what about all of the candidates out there who are trying to say that he did? Your Republican candidates that you want people to vote for?
Well, what about the people saying defund the police? You talk to them, I'll talk to that crowd.
Right, your crowd is a lot larger than my crowd.
So here's the point.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's a bit of a cop out from Graham. There are far more Republicans that did not believe that the election was legitimate than there are Democrats. Like, I'm talking elected Democrats that said that to defund the police. Like, it was a very, very small number of elected Democrats. It's like AOC, Cory Bush, maybe a few others, maybe Ilhan Omar. Bernie didn't even say it. But in terms of, not wanting to certify the election results, there was a giant swath of Republicans, like both at the state level and at the federal level, that were opposed to that. So I think that Lindsey Graham acting like it's a wash is a little fishy.
Talking about Trump because he can't talk about anything else. He can't tell you rationally why there's no end to gas prices. It's always somebody else. It's the oil companies. It's the drug companies. These policies are not working, Senator Sanders. We like President Trump or not. He secured our border. We had the lowest illegal immigrant crossings in 40 years because he got Mexico and the Triangle countries to help us, not work against us. He took on China for the first time, literally in my lifetime. We were energy independent because he put in production more acreage.
Did he call Honduras, Nicaragua, and Guatemala the Triangle countries? I'm sorry. Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. You call it the Triangle countries. There's a nickname for those countries that has the word triangle in it. I've never heard anyone call them the Triangle countries, though.
Responsibly in Anwar, and he approved the Keystone Pipeline. The Arabs and the Israelis were working together under his leadership, called the Abraham Accords. We replaced the USMCA, NAFTA with the USMCA. So the one thing I would say to President Trump, talk about what you did. Compare your record to what's going on now. You may actually win. To the American people. If you don't change who's running your government, things are going to get...
Okay, I think that was a little subtle dig at Trump there, because he said, talk about what you did, because I think a lot of people like Graham, who haven't leaned into the election fraud narrative, are frustrated with Donald Trump that he insists on talking about that all the time. Like, Donald Trump is constantly talking about the election stuff, like the election fraud, his whole claim. I think that it's not very motivating on the Democratic side or the Republican side. It's just not a very motivating issue. That's not what when you poll people on what they care about the most, it's the economy. That is the number one thing voters care about right now. And so I think that that's what Graham was getting at.
Worse at the border. Gas prices are going to continue to skyrocket. Inflation is out of control. The policies these people are pushing are never going to work. That doesn't mean we've got all the answers as Republicans, but I can tell you right now, the pathway to socialism is being paved as I speak, and the worst is yet to come. Vote Republican in 2020.
Right. Senator Sanders, you chuckled before when Senator Graham mentioned socialism.
Yes.
And you kind
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Right. And so I want to let you deal with that about
I understand we can do red baiting. I guess it works among a certain part.
Well, you're a socialist, aren't you?
I'm a democratic socialist.
Okay.
And the policies that I advocate are taking place all over the world. So I would like to ask Senator Graham, do you think raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour is socialistic? Do you think doing what every other major country on earth does, guaranteeing health care to all people, is socialistic? Do you think expanding Medicare to cover dental care is quite socialistic? Do you think in terms of Social Security, you're on the Budget Committee, we just had a hearing about this. Lindsay and I disagree on this. I think we should increase benefits for Social Security recipients by lifting the cap, which is now at $147,000. So a millionaire pays the same amount as somebody making $147,000. Lift that cap, we can increase Social Security benefits by $200 a month for every beneficiary in America. Is that socialistic? Is making sure that all of our kids are able to get a higher education? Is that socialistic? Is saying that 3 Wall Street companies should not control $20 trillion in assets, we got to break them up? Is that socialistic? Is saying that CEOs should not make 350 times what their workers make? So, I understand that certain words will have an impact on certain parts of our country. But take a look at the issues that we are fighting for, and every one of those issues. Lindsay, guess what? American people support me, not you.
Okay, let's talk about that. How do you solve problems? We're in the Ted Kennedy Orrin Hatch world. All I can say about your Social Security plan...
Wait. Lindsey Graham should answer. Does he think that those are socialists? He should have to actually answer that.
Benefits when the program's going broke, folks. When I was 21, my mom died. When I was 22, my dad died. I had a 13-year-old sister. We moved in with an aunt and uncle who worked in the textile plants. My world was rocked. If it hadn't been for survivor benefits coming into my family, because my sister was a minor, we'd had a hard time making it. I'm 66. I'm not married. I'm part of the problem. We need more kids out there. When in 1955, there were 9 workers paying into the system, 9 workers for every retiree. We're down to 3. 20 years, it'd be 2. Let's do something like Ted Kennedy would do. Get Republicans and Democrats to find a way, like the Gang of Six, the Simpson Bowles plan. Senator Sanders, bring your Social Security plan to the floor. All it does is raise taxes. To get out of this mess, people like me are going to have to take a little less and pay a little more in. We're going to have to adjust the age one more time, like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did. There is a bipartisan way forward. But you describe problems, but your answer is always the government. It's always socialism.
Social Security is a government program. I'm sorry about it.
Senator Sanders, your Medicare for All program.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a weird talking point. Like, they're talking about how can they help with some of the solvency issues surrounding Social Security. And he's like, oh, your answer is the government. But yet, like, Social Security is a government program. Like, you're going to have to do things around the government to solve Social Security.
Private sector health care is a $40 trillion revenue increase. It will cost more to maintain Medicare for all than the entire federal government today. There has to be some sense of responsibility here. You just can't tax people into oblivion and turn every problem over to the government.
Okay, let's respond. And I'm glad it's a good discussion. Thank you, Brett. Okay, Social Security. And again, we had Lindsay and I on the budget committee. We had a hearing on it. What you forgot to tell people, Lindsay, you're right. Social Security has a solvency issue. But the actuaries say we want 75 years of funding coming into Social Security and maintained for 75 years. What I advocated does that.
Let's vote.
Because it is let's vote on it.
Let's
Fine,
vote on
I'm
it.
voting on it. Let's ask the American people whether they think it makes sense that somebody who makes $1 million a year or $10 million a year or $100 million a year pays the same amount into Social Security. Somebody makes $147,000.
Let's vote on it.
Let's ask them. You know what? The polling has already given us the answer.
Well,
They think it is.
why aren't we voting on it? I mean,
I'm sorry, Lindsey Graham knows for a fact why they aren't voting on these things. The filibuster is allowed. It's just, he knows why.
Different way,
This is
Senator
fun,
Sanders.
right?
Let me ask you, hold on.
Because his plan, the reason he doesn't want to vote on it, nobody's going to vote
I
on it.
want to vote on it.
Well, you're in charge. Let's vote.
Can I get the Sergeant at Arms here? No, I'm sorry. Let me ask the question this way. The national debt, Senator Sanders, stands at more than $30 trillion. That's 133% of GDP, gross domestic product. Should Americans care about that? Is that a problem long term?
Yes, it is. It is, and it's something we want to deal with. Now, what Lindsay says, which is a Republican line, Social Security.
Bernie has Stephanie Kelton, has worked with his campaign before. Stephanie Kelton is a big modern monetary theory person. Bernie is, I know, if Bernie had, now don't get me wrong, if Bernie had said the debt isn't really a big issue, he would get hammered so hard in the media for that. But like at a certain point, we have to start changing the narrative over the way that the debt is talked about. The debt is really not a huge, of all the concerns that are facing America, the debt is at the bottom of the list.
I mean, Medicare for all going to raise your taxes. You know what? It will. But you know what else it's going to do? You ain't going to have to pay a nickel in premiums, a nickel in co-payments, a nickel in deductibles. And if you are the average family out there, or the average small business, or in fact the average corporation, you are going to save money. Now, Lindsay apparently thinks that people just love paying money to the insurance companies. Average family, average person in America, Lindsay, $12,000 a year. Insurance companies making huge profits. So if I go to the American people and I say, hey, Brett, guess what? You're going to pay more. You're going to pay $5,000 more in taxes, but you're going to pay $8,000 less in premiums, deductibles, and co-payments. Now, I know he works for Fox, maybe he can't say it, but most people would say, Bernie, that's a pretty good deal. You saved me $3,000, and you're guaranteeing comprehensive health care.
Senator, I was waiting for the Fox.
I like that little dig. I like that little joke from Bernie there.
Fox, yeah, I was waiting for it. Okay. Let's see if we can get to something you all agree on. Is there a common ground on any issue,
Sure,
that the two of you can see eye to eye on? And what is that?
Well, I don't know if, you know, I'm on the budget committee with Bernie, and it's been a blast. Listen, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, if I get to be chairman, vote Republican 2022.
I've said that a few times.
Yeah. So I'm going to call, remember Simpson Bowles guys, those guys? I'm going to call him in and say, okay, what would you advise us to do when it comes to saving Social Security? In 2034, if nothing changes, they can only pay 77% of the benefits because there are less people working and more people retired and they're living longer. So we all got this kind of Medicare is hanging by a thread.
I'm gonna remember this. Lindsey Graham wants to be budget committee chair so badly. I want to see if he actually gets it.
Part A begins to go bankrupt. There's things we can do. Here's what I think. Upper income Americans, like both of us, I am willing to take less from Social Security. I'm willing to have a different COLA and reshape my benefits. I'm willing to pay into more into Part A and B. I shouldn't be getting the subsidy because I'm doing pretty well. That kind of approach, Brett, entitlements are going to consume the budget. Right now, we're at 2050, we're going to have 185% of debt to GDP. Medicare and Social Security and other entitlement programs are worth saving are going to consume the debt. We're down to a small fraction of the federal pie to run the discretionary part of government. So entitlement reform is a must for us to not become Greece. So I'd like to work with Bernie to see if I can let's raise the cap. Okay, 147, let's raise it. If you raise it to 190,000, you capture 90% of most wages in the country. Let's look at maybe adjusting the age one more time if we need to.
Why would we only raise it to 190,000? Just get rid of the cap on taxable income for Social Security completely. Why should someone who makes $2 million a year, why should only the first, what would that be? 5% of their wages? If it's 200,000, so what would that be? 10%? Why should only the first 10% of their wages be taxed for Social Security? The other 90% of their wages aren't taxed. It's just, they should get rid of the cap.
Let's look at having a COLA for people 80 in the lower income brackets better than what I would get. Let's shift some of the burden from people who can afford to shift to some that can't to get through the baby boomers retiring. I'm really in finding a solution to entitlement reform. I'm talking too much. I'll turn it off. Energy production. We can have a lower carbon economy, but you can't do it this way.
Okay, Lindsay raised some good questions. Now, I hope everybody understands. When Lindsay talks about entitlement reform, what he's talking about is cutting benefits and raising the retirement age. Talks about Simpson Bowles. I oppose Simpson Bowles.
Boom, right there. Yes, entitlement reform is key for cutting benefits.
That is what they wanted to do. So here is the alternative on this one. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, where people on the top are doing phenomenally well, yes, Lindsay, they're going to have to pay more in taxes so that somebody earning the average Social Security benefit of $15,000 a year gets a break, okay? So I think you should lift the cap completely. You'll make Social Security solvent for 75 years, solve the legitimate issue you raised. And yes, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk will pay a lot more in taxes.
Well,
so what? Now, I want to say on Medicare, 1 minute.
On the common ground question,
Yeah.
I didn't get it out of that answer.
Well, what you got is that he sees it as a problem, I see it as a problem, all right? Medicare, I see Medicare solvency as a problem. That is why I want us to stop spending twice as much per person on healthcare as any other country on earth so that the insurance companies and drug companies don't continue to make huge profits. So I'd ask my friend, do you think...
if you care about the cost, this might be the point Bernie's about to make, but if you care about the cost of Medicare, allow Medicare to negotiate down the cost of pharmaceutical drug prices. Lindsey Graham does not support that, though.
Sense, Lindsay, that we have 70 million people uninsured and underinsured at the same time as insurance companies make huge profits and we spend twice as much as any other country on healthcare. Does that make sense to you? Is that a system that is worth defending?
I think here's the first thing I won't do. I will not take your private health care away from you unless you want it taken away yourself. His solution to your healthcare problem is to take away from you the healthcare you have today in the private sector. There are 200 million people below 65 that are insured in the private sector. I'd like to make it more efficient. I'd like to cover more people. When it comes to Medicare, we all get in the system when we're 65. He wants Medicare for all. He's going to invite hundreds of millions of people, tens of millions of people into the system, hadn't paid a dime. Medicare is hanging by a thread now. I guess the difference between Bernie and myself is that I know there is no way in hell we're going to fix Medicare with the Republicans or Social Security with the Republicans. I've got to give some. I'm willing to raise the cap. I'm willing to get people to pay more into the system. But we live in a global economy, folks. We had a 35% corporate rate. It went to 21. We're the highest in the developed world. Companies can leave America and go somewhere else. Tax policy matters. We can create tax systems in this country to drive people away. We can create tax systems in this country to incentivize.
Where are companies going to go? Every other developed nation has some form of universal healthcare. This argument makes no sense. We are the only developed nation that doesn't have universal healthcare. If the argument is, if we have universal healthcare, then we will be less favorable to businesses. What other country are they going to go to? Every other developed nation has it.
Job growth.
All right.
Final thought. Bipartisanship is the only way to solve these problems. Take your bills that you've put down as solutions, put them on the floor, and here's what you're going to find. No bipartisan support.
Okay, there is a bipartisan agreement currently on gun control legislation. 10 senators on the Republican side have signed on. Senator Graham, you're one of them. It's in formulation. The legislation is being written, but it deals with mental health, advocating for red flag laws, tightening background checks, licensed firearm dealers. There are some specifics in there. Senator Sanders, you're not on as of yet. Is that a common ground issue around the edges that don't deal with everything you want that you all can get to?
Right. Look, if that bill, and you're right, it hasn't been written yet. We have an outline of it. If that bill came to the floor, would I vote for it? I'm quite sure I would. Does it go anywhere near far enough? No, it does not. It is a step forward. I think clearly it does not go far enough. And as a nation, and again, as I said, I come from a rural state. Most people do not use AR-15s to hunt deer. These are weapons, these military-type weapons designed to kill people as quickly as possible, to mow people down. And as a nation, we are going to have to decide whether or not it is appropriate to do what virtually no other major country does. Allow somebody to walk into a gun store and buy one of these weapons and then come out, and if they're suicidal or homicidal or whatever they may be, just mow people down. And the tragedies we've seen recently in Buffalo and Texas, unspeakable, just horrible beyond words. So those are the decisions. I think this is a start, but I believe we have to go much, much further.
Senator, a closing statement here as we're coming to the end of this segment, and I was trying to find the common ground. I'm not sure we really got there, but there's promise, right, Senator?
No comment.
No comment.
So let me tell you.
Okay, Bernie. Just he's like, there's not much common ground between me and Lindsey Graham. That's really interesting. Lindsey Graham is at least optically attempting a lot more to appear bipartisan in this debate. But Bernie is just like, nope, no comments on finding common ground with Lindsey Graham.
Common ground is what we've done in the past. Senator Kennedy worked on a comprehensive immigration bill with me and others. And I wish we'd have passed it because most of these problems have gone away. He worked with President Bush on No Child Left Behind. There's a model here that works.
Bernie isn't independent. Bernie is already finding common ground when he agrees with it. When he works with the Democrats, he's already compromising. He's like, I'm not so sure I'm going to reach across that far.
Yeah, listen, I admire Senator Sanders. He has his own message. He's got solutions. I don't think they'll work. I've never had such a hard time begging somebody to vote on their own bill. The bottom line is there are ways forward, but it's going to be a bipartisan path. That's the way it's been in the past, the way it will be in the future, and I stand ready to do that. But we need to stop this madness. What's going on in Washington needs to stop, and these people in charge need to be told no, because your family life's going to get worse unless we do. Let's talk about guns. We made some news here today. Senator Sanders says he'd be open-minded, depending on how it's written, to the package we've negotiated. That's a big deal, because it's not what he would want. To his credit, there are things in there that you'd want that we can't put in the package for different because other people don't want them. So the fact that Bernie's willing...
Of the 10 Republicans that flipped on the, or not flipped, but that are willing to work on that like bipartisan gun bill, I did not know that Lindsey Graham was one of the 10. Interesting.
The vote for this is very encouraging to me. We'll see how it shakes out. And what happened here, you know, after New York, after Buffalo, and after the shooting in Texas, there's a common thing. Very disturbed people getting guns and doing terrible things with them. I own an AR-15. I served in the military, and I got an AR-15 with a SEAL in my reserve unit. If you ever have to defend yourself, maybe a double-barrel shotgun at your house, if everything breaks down and the mobs come, it's not enough. We're not going to ban assault weapons. We did that, tried to vote on that in 2013, got 60 no votes. But we can do some things. We can enhance background checks for 18 to 21-year-olds. We can give states who have red flag laws money to hire more psychologists, more psychiatrists, and more cops. We can do some things on the mental health front that will maybe intervene in these people's lives before it's too late. So this package, with Bernie's support, if we can write it the right way, we'll get 70 votes. And that's no small thing. So I want to say this as we close. Thank you, Bernie, for being willing to be open-minded.
70 votes. That would mean 20 Republicans would have to flip and vote in favor of the gun legislation. That would have to be a very watered-down piece of legislation, frankly. To get 20 Republicans to vote on it, it would have to be very, very watered down. But still, I mean, what he talked about there, like increased background checks on 18 to 21-year-olds, more money for psychologists for states with red flag laws. I mean, that's all. That is good stuff. So,
supporting this package, because if you do, I think it will give cover on the lefts from people who are upset it's not enough. John Cornyn, Mitch McConnell, maybe myself, will give some cover to people on the right when people say it's too much. So it'd be a great thing if the Senate could come together and do this pretty soon.
Final words, Senator.
If I could, and again, thank you for this discussion. The political difference, aside from all of the ideas that we disagree on between Lindsey and myself, is Lindsey keeps saying, let's go to the Senate, let's go to the House, let's have bipartisanship. I'm all for that. When I was in the House, I probably passed more legislation on the floor with Republican support than any other member. So I'm for that. But at the end of the day, there is a bigger issue, Lindsey. And the issue that we have to ask is, in fact, at this moment in history, is the United States Congress, in fact, representing the needs of the majority of the people in our country, or are they representing powerful special interests? And I think most people, frankly, whether they are conservative Republicans or progressives, will tell me that the Congress is way, way out of touch with the needs of the American people. Now, you may disagree with Medicare for all. You may disagree with expanding Social Security, lifting the cap, whatever it may be. That's not where the American people are at. So yeah, I believe in bipartisanship, but more important, I believe we have a corrupt political system dominated by wealthy campaign contributors. I think we got to end this disaster of Citizens United Supreme Court decision. I think we got to revitalize American democracy. We have to need Republicans to say Trump is not telling the truth. He did not win the election. That democracy, with all of its faults, is better than authoritarianism. So that's where I think Lindsey and I disagree.
Senator Sanders, Senator Graham, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And
shout out to Bernie to just tying it all back together on the issues that really matter at the end there. Because, I mean, that is the reality. The reason Lindsey Graham is willing to compromise on gun issues and less so economic issues is because there's not as much money behind him telling him not to compromise on gun issues, right? You know, you do have the NRA and different moneyed interests, but for the most part, there's Lindsey Graham has a far bigger. We looked at his Open Secrets page before. Hundreds of thousands of dollars he's received from the private health insurance industry. Specifically, so he opposes something like Medicare for All that would get rid of the private health insurance industry. And so I think that, you know, I appreciate Bernie tying it back there. Brought up Citizens United, brought up the campaign finance reform. I think that's all really good stuff. So excellent debate.